What's going on, everyone? It is time to rank some mounts today. I got all these cute little images that I cut out. Some of them looking a little bit janky, but they're pretty cool to see. And we got to rank these on a tier list today. Now, there's going to be two parts of the video. The first part is going to be ranking this in a free-to-play context. That's going to be very low star level or 0 star level and just the initial unlocks. What are these offering in terms of skills, global bonuses, as well as the actual mount skill itself, not just the awakening skill, but actually the used mount skill. And then we're going to be doing the second part, which is the maxed out mounts, the ones that when you invest into them, what are they going to provide? Now, it's also important to remember that mounts are a little bit different than something like a weapon or armor, because you can only use one weapon or one armor piece on your character at a given time, whereas the mounts have a lot of global effects, global bonuses, so eventually you want to unlock them all and upgrade them all. So the tiers aren't going to be, okay, don't invest into this one, but rather a priority list of sorts in terms of which mounts are a little bit more valuable to invest in others. And mind you, some of mounts are less valuable than others simply because of the resources they use. A perfect example of this is to take some of the growth shop mounts, like Roach versus King Kong. Roach costs 20 tickets, whereas King Kong cost 30 blue Dark Moon tickets. So King Kong literally has to be compared directly with Roach in terms of it is 50% more expensive to get the upgrades for King Kong over Roach. Very similar to also the Toffee versus Laputa argument, because they both require gold Dark Moon tickets, but across 30 to get the same amount of star progression as Laputa, which costs 20. So this is kind of going to be a consideration, especially when it comes to the free-to-play side of things, because those are going to be initial unlocks, but also when it comes to the late game as well, because, well, you might be able to get to the later star levels quicker than other mounts and actually get the maximum effectiveness, but only minor effects when we're talking about the max tier list, because really we're focusing in on the actual stats and the actual effect of the mount and what you're getting there. That said, let's not waste any more time and let's dive into it with the first mount on the list. So the first mount on our list is going to be a little bit of an anomaly. As we dive into the rest of the list, most of it is going to be based on, again, all sorts of different factors, including cost, the skill effects, and everything like that. The first one in the Crocodile is actually just our baseline Capybara Go mount. As for the effect of it, you're going to get damage boosts. So damage reduction and main character damage boosts if you were to use the skill of that mount. So if you were to use the skill, let's say of the Crocodile, which is the base mount, you're going to get a, well, 1% main character damage boost and a 1% damage reduction boost, which is really just kind of mediocre. The global effects are a little bit of HP or defense, a percentage or attack percentage as you're going up. It's going to increase from 1 to 3%. And then each of these little mounts, it goes from crocodile to snail to newt to turtle to pig to duck to seal to dragon. Each one of these are just going to be progressed as you get the horseshoes invested in the mount. And it's going to each have a little bit of a different effect. But to be honest, all of them are on the weaker side for the most part, especially in the earlier stages of the game, to where you're never going to use the mount skill or the awakened skill or the deployed riding skill. And so because of that, to me, it's just a D tier. Even though the resources associated with it are exclusively for this mount, it's not something that you're going to want to use ever. It's just, hey, I'm going to upgrade it for just baseline stats. And that to me is like a D tier. I'm just going to upgrade it for global stats, and that's pretty good. Even though it doesn't give you a ton of global stats, just because, well, they're free global stats. Like, you may as well get them. As we dive into the next one, the Roach, we finally start to talk about one that actually requires some investment and actually has some skills and options that, well, you can use. Roach here, and I'm going to put them in B tier as I start out, just to kind of describe them so you can see what I'm talking about. This one has a skill of pet damage per round plus 10%. And then you have a owned effect of just having the mount. The global effect is just increasing pet damage by 15%. Its base speed is 6, and that therefore it upgrades by 6 every single time for the most part. And then it has a riding skill of every time pet skill is released 6 times, it's going to release an angry carrot dealing damage equal to the main character's attack as skill damage. And then as you upgrade it or awaken it, it's going to get a little bit better. But again, not really going to focus that for the free-to-play one. So the Roach here, to me, immediately is not exactly all that exciting. Why? Well, because pet damage is not something that you rely on basically at all in the game, especially in the early game. Like, pet damage, it's okay, but increasing your pet damage is really going to give you minimal bonuses. And that's where I'm like, not exactly that exciting. Now, one of the things that it does help with is like progressing the raid celestial tree. That isn't bad because it's really based around mounts. So there is some viability there, but there really isn't a whole lot. And I suppose it is one of the cheaper mounts, I guess you could say, in terms of like actual ticket purchasing, because it requires 20 of the blue dark moon tickets. It's one of the easier ones to get, so it's a C tier for me. Not a bad unlock, period. As I will say with a lot of these, like you could just pick up an unlock for this and you'll be totally okay with that, but it's nothing that you should be excited about. Next up, we've got King Kong. This one is another one that is accessible through the dark moon ticket acquisition here. This one is going to give you, when counterattacking, you're going to release 1 light spear, and counterattack damage is increased by 10%, lasting for 1 turn, stacking up to 10 times. It's going to give you a global effect of 10% counter rate, and then it's going to give you 6 speed. The awakened effect, or the riding skill, is going to give you, when you counter, it's going to release Kong counter. It's going to deal 100% of the attack of your attack as counter damage, and then increase the light spear damage by 10%, stackable up to 5 times. So a little bit of value there in terms of King Kong. This one is pretty mediocre for the most part. Like, counter percentage doesn't matter a ton in the early game, especially because you need to stack up a lot. And especially as you get later and later on, it's going to get weaker and weaker, but it's not bad by any means. Extra light spears, especially in the early game, is, you know, not bad at all. It is really not that bad. And so when you're looking at this, okay, I get a little bit of counter rate, I get a little bit of counter damage. Yes, like it's not going to matter a ton, but the light spear is actually pretty useful in the early game. The speed's not bad, and the extra counter damage can matter. So it's not a bad pickup for early progression. It's going to get a B tier. It's going to get a B tier for me, and it does go higher if you are a counter-based build. Like if you are someone who is utilizing the Durian Hammer or the Mushroom Hammer or using that direction, but it is also a little bit more expensive than something like the Roach. So if you're just looking for global stats, then, you know, the Roach is more immediate. But again, the Roach is not something that's like super great. So even though the King Kong costs more, the Roach is going to be a little bit weaker on the list here. Next one on our list is Laputa. Now this one's quite interesting. It's also more expensive than the other two that we just spoke about, because it is going to use the gold Dark Moon tickets, which require you to actually win events. This one requires a little bit of investment, but it has an effect of, or the skill of, when battle starts, you're going to deal damage to all enemies and a chance to inflict stun. 30% chance at 0 stars. It's going to give you global effect of 10% combo rate. It's going to give you speed +6 because it's a legendary mount. And then it's going to have a awakened skill, or a riding skill, of deal percentage of our attack and then to all enemies, and then increase our skill damage, stacking up to 3 times for 10% each stack. This one's actually not bad, but mainly because the combo rate, although it scales better than counter rate in the early game, they're actually pretty similar. It's just that a lot of builds that most people are commonly going for work better with combo rate, because it's something that you're already adding into your build and what you're prepping for. So similar to King Kong, if you're using a build that's using combo rate, it's going to be a little bit stronger because it's going to synergize better. But still, as a baseline, very similar to counter rate in the early stages of the game, although there's skills that work with combo rate way more, so it's still a little bit stronger. Laputa, on the other hand, specifically, the strength in my mind in the early game and even later on is coming from the skill effect of the chance to stun. Chance to stun can give you an opportunity to push further than you otherwise typically would because of the CC given to you from Laputa. Now again, it's a smaller chance, 30% isn't crazy, but does do some good work. Now it's not incredible, but I do think it warrants like a low A tier as a mount that is still good. It's still a good mount. It's still going to give you combo rate. It's still going to be one that's interesting to upgrade, but it's not going to be something that's going to absolutely run the whole game. It's just a nice one to slot in certain circumstances to get you a little bit more value. The next one up, we got Toffee. This one is actually really, really interesting to me because we get a skill effect. And by the way, Toffee also uses gold Dark Moon tickets, which 30 of them, which is, well, 10 more than Laputa. So you're competing directly with Laputa. But you have a global damage reduction of 10% as the skill, plus recover 10% HP every 2 rounds. You're also going to get a global effect of 10% damage reduction. And then you're going to get a base speed of 8. So a little bit more speed than the other ones because it's a mythic mount. And then you're going to give a awaken or writing skill of every 3 turns release candy charge, dealing damage as skill damage to all enemies. And then the protagonist or the main character is going to gain 0 to 3 non-repeating candies. These candies can give you anywhere from restoring HP to shield to extra attack. You can't double or triple up on them. So it would be, 3 separate ones if you do get 3 candies. This one's actually pretty good. I do like this one a lot. And honestly, the thing I like about it is actually the global effect. So unlike, the combo rate or counter rate, I think damage reduction specifically when you're trying to climb through chapter is exceptionally powerful. It allows you to get a little bit more leeway with your pets when you're not able to upgrade them a ton with the spirit stones. It's also going to give you a pretty good skill in the early game, which is again more damage reduction. But also if you're going to be, let's say, summoning on a specific banner and you don't have Dragon's Breath armor, Toffee's skill gets way more valuable for you. That extra restoring is actually pretty nice. Once you get Dragon's Breath armor, Toffee, in my opinion, goes down a little bit of value. To me, it's like an A tier. I think depending on where you're going to go, I think behind or in front of Laputa in the early game is pretty nice. I think Laputa has some more options in terms of, okay, the stunning can just win you battles, even though global damage reduction is good for everyday usage and helping you just kind of push content. Laputa's option helps you cheese content, which is kind of nice. So that can help you a little bit. Also, the effect of it, getting those candies, is a little bit random, and in some cases it could be pretty good, and in some cases it's going to be kind of like whatever. But I could definitely see, an A tier above Laputa. Mind you, again, you can only use one skill or one writing skill, so got to make sure you're choosing the right ones. Next up, we've got the Luminous Dragon. This one is a lot more difficult to obtain, and in fact, the rest of these, with the exception of the Overlord Deer, you will have to obtain through the Capybara. And that is going to be a lot, because that is going to be a lot of your progression, because those are going to be also the ways you obtain a lot of other artifacts and things like that are going to be really strong. So the choice of mounts really matters for this because it's going to be harder to upgrade. And so some are going to be way better just because of the fact that it's harder to upgrade them. That said, we get to start off with the Luminous Dragon, as I mentioned. Now, Luminous Dragon, this one is going to have an ability where you cast Bolt every 1 round. You increase crit rate by 3 and crit damage by 15% each round with a maximum of 5 stacks. So up to, 15% or... 75% crit damage, and then you get the bolt every round. The global effect is 10% global damage attack, rather, and then you get a base speed of 8, and then you have the Luminous Dragon skill or riding skill, where it's going to deal damage equal to the protagonist attack to enemies, and then this damage is also boosted by the normal attack damage bonus and skill damage bonus. So it's going to basically just do a bunch of damage as its skill effect. Or rather, the riding skill effect. Honestly, the riding skill effect is not that great. The thing that I'm really excited about is the used skill effect, and that's going to be an S tier. I actually think this one is one of the best ones in the early game portion of the game. As I mentioned, damage reduction is nice, stunning is nice, it can help you cheese content, but one of the things is you can build your pets for damage reduction at most parts when you acquire these at 0 stats. And you can also go ahead and cheese stuns out by just replaying the battles over and over again from your gear pieces. What you can't do is really push your damage to next levels like you can with the Luminous Dragon in a lot of situations. And if you're using a build like Reaper Staff, where you're using bolts already in the early game, that's going to massively boost your progression. So the crit rate, crit damage obviously boosts your damage, but then the bolts also synergize with everything else that you got going on. The global attack is really nice. This one to me is one of the better progression ones to acquire, and then kind of drops off later and later as you go along. Not because it's bad, but because there are just some really, really powerful ones that get a lot more valuable. Next one up is Diego. Diego is definitely one of the ones that I think some people are going to have a little bit of words with me, but it is early game, remember what I want to mention here. We have his skill is combo +1, which means you can do an extra combo attack. That is massive, by the way, because there's only a limitation, or there's a limitation to how many combo attacks you can do, and this bumps that cap up. So now you can do an extra combo. We have a combo rate plus 5% per round up to 20%, so 4 rounds max stack. 10% global HP as the global bonus, 8 speed, and then after the protagonist's basic attack is the riding skill. Diego has a chance to release Tiger Strike, dealing damage and causing the enemy to bleed, and it can trigger a maximum of 2 times per turn. So actually the skill isn't the greatest, getting a little bit of damage in, or the riding skill that is, or the awakened skill. Getting a little bit of damage and bleeding. Bleeding is pretty weak in terms of a debuff. It doesn't do a ton of damage. It's okay. It's not amazing. It's not horrible. The speed's nice. The global HP is nice. Honestly, the global HP feels a little bit weaker than it would be as you push quite a bit further when you start actually having star levels. And the used skill, although combo +1 is good and combo rate is good, typically in the early game, you're not actually going to have maxed out combo rate to the point where you're actually able to use the combo +1 a significant amount. So when you're thinking about progression in the game, unless you're using like Sky Splitter, which has a lot of inbuilt combo rate to the build, Diego's not going to be nearly as valuable as some other options. Take, for example, Whisper. I would take Luminous Dragon over Diego in a lot of situations because I don't have that combo rate. But once you start getting some stars on your mounts and start progressing a little bit further, yeah, Diego's going to get a lot better. Does that mean he's horrible? No, he's still pretty good. I would definitely put him in like A tier. I would actually probably put him over Toffee just because the damage reduction is a little bit easier to acquire than the combo rate. So still not bad by any means. Still completely viable, and one that's going to get a lot better as you get more combo rate. But in the early game, it's going to be a lot more difficult to take advantage of that bonus that he's giving you. Next up, we've got the Sphinx. The Sphinx, this one is, again, another Cappy Gotcha one. This is going to be skill crit rate plus 10% and attack plus 30% for 2 rounds after triggering a skill crit, which is going to be pretty common, to be honest. We get a crit plus 10% as the global effect. Now, typically, what this global effect does with the just straight up crit rate is it applies to your base crit rate, not your skill crit rate necessarily. And you guys can correct me if I'm wrong in the comment section down below. But as far as I've seen, that crit rate is just baseline crit rate. Skill crit rate's like a specific separate entity. And then we have 8 speed. And when Sphinx enters, release Life Gaze to deal 1 time of the protagonist's attack as skill damage and resurrect 1 dead mount, restoring 50% of its health. If there are no dead mounts, grant a shield equal to 20% of the protagonist's max HP. So a little bit of shield or reviving a dead mount. Okay, not bad at all. This one is actually pretty interesting because what's going to happen is you're going to basically sit back and utilize the big bonuses that you're getting for your skill crit rate and your attack and then your overall crit rate and just do a bunch more damage. That's pretty much what you're doing. The Awakened skill is actually quite nice. It's one of the better ones in the early game, especially. Mainly because when you are utilizing it, you're going to be able to really either shield yourself quite a bit or revive a mount. And we all know how powerful reviving mounts can actually be. That said, the value from the skill crit and the attack percentage usually isn't as valuable as the overall crit rate from something like Luminous Dragons if you're actually going for this strategy. The global effect is very good, especially on something like Whisper, but the overall mount I don't think is quite as good as Luminous Dragon, but it is still quite good. And I would take this just because it provides you a lot of survivability, it gives you a little bit of crit rate and attack percentage. It can help you push stages as well by boosting up your damage, so it's an S tier one for me as well. It's going to be pretty strong. Next up, we've got Catastrophe. And this one isn't necessarily a catastrophe, but it's not going to be as good as some other options here. So we've got a skill, global damage reduction plus 10% and 20% chance to be immune to control effects. Actually not bad. We have global defense, 10% as the global bonus, 8 speed, and we have an ability of releasing Heavenly Disaster once every 3 turns, dealing damage and reducing the target's damage by 20% for 1 turn. So, what are we getting from Catastrophe? Honestly, the thing I like the most is the Awakened or Riding skill. this is one of the stronger ones in the game, just because reducing your target's damage by 20% can be very valuable. It is very, very valuable. Now, outside of that, the global damage reduction and chance to be immune to control effects, they're good stats in general, but in the early game, you're not going to be controlled all that often. And the global damage reduction is just weaker than Toffee's because you're also going to get that recovery, which is really nice. The actual global effect, defense, is one of the weakest stats you could acquire, so that's also just not that great. You really are getting this if you want the awakened skill or the riding skill. And there are some other options out there, like Sphinx, that also gives you a bunch of other bonuses. So reasonable, but not amazing. It's going to be like a low B tier for me. It's going to be pretty good to acquire just because you're going to get bonuses, but it is one of the last mounts that I had really gone for in the Cappy Gotcha. It is not something that I am very excited about. You have a lot better options. 3 in the A or S tier over Catastrophe. I think this bonus, while it is okay and something you're going to want to acquire, well, probably not immediately. And lastly on our list, we've got Overlord Deer. Now, this one's a little bit interesting. I actually don't know if I've actually seen the option to obtain this. I believe it's from an event similar to like the Big Adventure, where you're purchasing tickets to go ahead, and I say tickets as like a global thing where you're basically entering into this drawing pool and trying to obtain the mount that way. So it's a little bit more of a pay to win one in general. So it's already going to lose some points for that. But it does have a skill of each turn get continuous damage plus 5%. And when the enemy does take continuous damage, you're going to get a shield equal to that damage. And then you're also going to 20% of the damage, that, by the way. And then you can only get a shield up to 50% of your HP. So it is capped. For the global effects, you're going to get 15% HP, so a little bit better than the other 10%. It's going to give you 10 base speed, and it's going to do Deer Stampede every 2 turns, dealing burning, poison, and bleeding damage equal to our attack. And after release, it immediately deals damage equal to the total burning, poison, and bleeding damage for that, well, continuous damage procs that you've had on that target. So what is the Overlord Deer really doing? It's working with your damage over time effect. So as it was doing in terms of the actual riding skill, the bleeds, the poisons, the what's it called, burnings that you're putting on people, those are going to be what is going to progress your overall damage on this. That is not something that most builds are able to build around in the early game. It is something that's really difficult to acquire, and honestly, the effect of it isn't actually that powerful. It's also a little bit more difficult to obtain, and something that is probably not actually worth your resources, especially in the early game, even though the gems are, you know, not something that is used for all of the mounts. I still even think that it might not even be worth to really, it's always worth to get a mount, don't get me wrong, but it's not really worth to like go out of your way to get this mount, whereas some other ones are. To me, this is actually like a C tier. It's above Roach, okay? It's above Roach, in my opinion. Roach is just so much easier to get and actually has a relevant effect that you could use for some certain content. But the global effect is really, really solid on this one. And it also is going to give you a lot of speed. It's also going to give you a decent riding skill, and that's pretty nice. And if you do use continuous damage, it does have a niche in there. So to me, it's like a C tier option. I don't know if anyone's had a great experience with this at 0 stars compared to other mounts with their early game builds. It's a very niche specific circumstance. But to me, in theory, because I have not actually played with this, but all the builds that I know of isn't really synergizing all that well with Overlord Deer comparatively to all the other options that you have, and even just the baseline general effects that you can get, like with Catastrophe or even Toffee with like global damage reduction. That's just really good for progression in general. That said, that's going to be our free-to-play list where we're 0 stars. Let's dive into the pay-to-win list, or the max stars version. All right, and we're going to start out with the Crocodile in D tier just as a start for the exact same reasons as before, guys. These ones don't get upgraded. They don't get star level bonuses. There's nothing really different here. As for the rest of them, they're going to get 2 things when you start them up. One is as you get to the 5th star, you're going to get a big bonus on your main skill. You're also going to get a bonus to the global effect that they're providing. For example, with Roach, you get the pet damage. You're going to increase that as you get up with star level. You're also going to get more speed with the star level. And then you're also as you awaken them, specifically to awakening level, well, maximum, which is awakening level 10, I believe, you're going to be getting bigger effects on your riding skill. So you have the star level and you have the awakening level. They're two separate progression mechanics. Usually the awakening level is a little bit easier because you can acquire that through the events that come around, whereas the star level you have to wait for each of the specific mechanics. Like for Roach, it's growth events. For Luminous Dragon, it's Cappy Gotcha. Whereas like all the random events that come along usually has some sort of mount cores that you can grab, usually. Although they're not as strong as the star level, so just keep that in mind. That said, Roach, this one, it's a D tier. I wouldn't actually go ahead and upgrade this one. It's going to be really low on your priority list. In the early game, you can pick it up. It's much easier to pick up, but actually to invest into it, there are just so many better options. And so this is going to be one of the last ones, especially when you start to invest in that. You should be maxed out on the advantages that you could have gotten with Roach. Like pet damage, as I said, the Celestial Tree, that can be a place for it. But the overall actual damage from the riding skill, the pet damage from the actual skill, or the pet damage from the global effect doesn't actually give you that much of a bonus until, way later. Like the pet damage global bonus can give you a little bit of extra damage when you go for the full damage in pet builds, but again, that's like one of the final things that you're upgrading. Next up, we've got King Kong. Now King Kong is actually pretty good. The difference here with the extra star level is that you're going to get an extra counter damage. Instead of 10%, it's going to be 15%, and instead of for 1 round, it's for 2 rounds, and it's going to stack up to 10 stacks. You're going to get extra counter rate, you're going to get extra speed, and then more importantly, it's going to, as you go along and do the counter attack, when King Kong releases that King Kong counter, you're also going to get a light spear, and you're going to deal counter damage equal to 5% of the target's max HP, which is a big hit. It's actually a really big hit. So the riding skill is actually pretty good. The counter rate's actually pretty good for the counter builds, and the light spears can be pretty good if you're, again, running a counter-based build. To me, this is like an A tier one. It's pretty reasonable for the counter-based strategies. It has its niche. It's still good in general. Like even if I was something that is based around combo or skill damage or whatever it is, counter rate's still good. Like that is still something that you want to apply to your build. It's just something that you probably won't use the skill effect or the riding skill effect for. But the builds that do want counter rate or counter damage, and that's how they do a lot of their stuff, King Kong isn't a bad option. It's not. It's like lower A tier. You could argue for a high B tier as well. And maybe as we put more on the list here and I see what we're ending up with, I might have to drop it a little bit, but it's still really, really quite excellent for those specific builds especially. Next up, we've got Laputa. Laputa is actually pretty good. Laputa is the one that gives you the stun and the damage. When you max it out, you're going to get a little bit extra stun rate, a little bit extra damage. The combo rate is the global skill effect. And then as you are getting the riding skill effect, you're going to get extra skill damage to the target. The target's going to take extra skill damage. And when Laputa dies, you're actually going to get extra skill damage on your Capybara here. So it's really based around the mount dying as the riding skill, which isn't that strong. Really, honestly, one of the most priority thing about this is just the global effect. Combo rate is incredibly important for Sky Splitter, Whisperer, Reaper Staff. Basically any build in the game really wants combo rate. Combo rate just stacks so nicely, and so this is one of the priority ones just because you can get extra combo rate from the upgrades, and that is really, really strong. So just because you can get that, I am a lot more excited about it, and that's going to be something that you really want to upgrade, period. Next up, we've got Toffee. Now, Toffee's quite interesting as well, because the bonuses on the riding skill is actually interesting. So for the skill, you're going to get extra global damage reduction from 10 to 15%. You're going to get recover 15% HP every 2 rounds. You're going to get an owned effect of damage reduction increasing, or the global effect. You're going to get a riding skill increase of, for every candy effect that you have, you're going to get 5% global damage reduction. And when Toffee dies, you're going to get a shield equal to 20% of your maximum HP. So a little bit of death mechanic as well. Mounts do die, but the ideal scenario is that mounts don't die because you're CCing your opponent and you don't get one shot, right? Anyways, the damage reduction is valuable. It is very valuable. But when you're in the late game, this is something that's probably already capped out because of the pet skills. And if it's not, then you're probably getting one shot, so it's not going to matter as much. The HP recovery is not as good as it may seem, again, because you're getting one shots. One of the reasons why people run Revival Cape. It's not horrible. It's one that I do think is worth investing into, especially if you're still, even though you're maxing mounts and stuff, that doesn't mean you're necessarily maxing out chapters and everything like that, although it is probably likely that you're doing so. So to me, it's like a B tier. It's not horrible, but it's not amazing. Like the HP recovery, again, you have gems for that now. You have Dragon's Breath armor if you were using that, which is going to give you the recovery. You don't need the global damage reduction nearly as much because you can get it from your pets, especially at this stage of the game. And the effect, the skill effect, is just okay. It's just decent. And it depends on the situation for what candies you get from Toffee. Remember, you can get up to three different candies, and each one's going to do something different. So if you have 3 different candies, you're going to get an extra 15% global damage reduction, which isn't bad. But again, you've probably already capped out on that. Next up, we got the Luminous Dragon, and this one is actually pretty good still, but doesn't have quite the same ceiling as some of the other mounts. You're going to get that bolt every round still, but you're going to instead get 4.5% instead of 3% crit rate and 25% crit damage instead of 50% crit damage each round, up to 5 stacks. So that's a pretty significant chunk. But when you're in these late game stages, you're going to have a lot more crit rate, and the crit damage is going to be found from other sources, so it's not going to be as valuable, but you're going to get global effect from the big bonus. And then you're going to get the riding skill bonus, or the awakened skill bonus, of giving you extra stacking damage on the damage that the Luminous Dragon is doing from its riding skill. And then you're also going to get extra damage equal to 5% of the target's max HP when you launch that skill. So, okay, basically the key is I'm getting some extra crit rate and crit damage, which is not bad, but more of like an A tier effect. More of like an A tier effect. It is certainly decent for builds that are looking for extra crit rate. Builds like Whisperer, for example, cap out very, very quickly. When you get to this stage of the game, the crit damage matters a lot less because you have all sorts of other ways to get crit damage. The bolts are something that I would think about with Reaper Staff, but Reaper Staff gets more value from other mounts on the list and can really scale your damage to the next level. So although Luminous Dragon has some pros, it's just not going to be as valuable as some other mounts, and still requires the Cappy Gotcha coins. And that's one thing that, well, the rest of the mounts actually require, with the exception of Overlord Deer. That said, we get to move on to Diego, which, let's be honest, guys, this is the #1 mount in the game for most builds. It is just absolutely exceptional. I mentioned this earlier, but extra combo count is fantastic. The reason why it was lower on our early level, our early tier list, is while you can get combo rate, it is harder to get combo rate. And you still need to combo multiple times in a round in order to actually get use out of that extra combo chance or extra combo count. And then there's also brands that trigger extra combo count. But when you're at the point where you're 5-starring, for Diego, instead of getting 5% counter rate per round, you're going to get 8% combo rate per round. Then it stacks up pretty nicely up to 5 times. So 40% additional combo rate, you're getting extra global HP, and you're going to, as the extra bonus for the skill, or riding skill, give extra bleeding damage, which honestly isn't like insane, but still nice to get extra damage in there. Really, it's the combo. It's the skill from Diego. That's what makes it so powerful. When you're at the stage of like Sky Splitter or Whisper, and you have Sky Splitter at 100% combo count, or Whisper at like 80 to 90%, the extra combo count gives you a full extra trigger of Whisper throwing daggers and potentially generating more rage, Sky Splitter triggering its legendary and mythic effects. Like, that's what Diego's there for, and it does an amazing job at ramping your damage. And it's even good for things like the Whisperer, because Whisperer, or Reaper Staff rather, because Reaper Staff also wants to combo again and again and again, use the rage skill again and again and again. And that is the key with Diego. Maxing out your combo count is key to massive amounts of damage in the late game. Next up, we've got Sphinx here. This one is that skill crit rate and skill attack percentage for 2 rounds after triggering a skill crit. Instead of 10% skill crit rate, you're gonna get 15%, and instead of 30% attack, you're gonna get 45% attack. You're an extra crit for the global bonus. And then When you have the riding skill, you're going to get, when it dies, you're going to get mount damage reduction plus 30% and mount damage plus 50%. And when any mount's ultimate ability deals damage, you're going to gain a stack of cat soul. And then when the Sphinx dies, you're going to consume all cat souls to revive. And each stack of cat soul restores 25% of the mount's HP after revival. You immediately release the effect of the skill when a mount or after you revive the mount. So you're immediately going to get the effect earlier of like resurrecting a dead mount, get shield effect, and get a damage trigger in. So what is this doing? It's raising your damage ceiling oftentimes because skill crit rate is hard to come by, and the extra attack percentage you get is going to be a massive bonus, and the extra just baseline crit is also a pretty good global bonus. And then the PvP aspect of this is the awakening skill is actually really strong to be able to revive mounts. This to me is also an S tier. It's got maximum damage cap exceeding that, which is nice, and it also has some viability in PvP, which isn't really like something I can say about all the mounts. So that's a really nice bonus in Sphinx's favor. Next up, we got Catastrophe. Catastrophe is global damage reduction, as I said earlier, but instead of 10%, you're going to get 15%, and instead of 20% chance to immune control effects, you're going to get 35% chance to immune control effects. The defense is pretty weak from global effect. Again, you're going to get extra speed, and then the riding skill is after Catastrophe appears, you're going to increase global skill damage reduction, and then you're also going to get control immunity rate increased. Here's the thing with this. This to me is like purely a PvP mount. The extra chance to immune control effects and the extra damage reduction and global defense don't really do a whole lot in PvE circumstances. The awakening skill is what I'm more excited about with this one, and that one is definitely worth like a low B tier just because of the PvP effectiveness. That's where I see Catastrophe. It is effective in PvP. That is where the usage is. Next up, we've got Overlord Deer, and this one, as we said earlier, is based around continuous damage to bleeds, poisons, that type of stuff. It is going to give you, instead of 5% extra continuous damage each turn, it's going to give you 10%. And instead of 20% HP shield, or 20% equal to the damage shield, you're going to get 30% of the damage. And you cannot exceed 20% of the protagonist max HP in shield amount. It's going to give you extra global HP as the global bonus. And then as of the extra awakening effects, you're going to have the extra damage is increased, the additional damage based on their dots on them or bleeding, poison, etc. on the unit is going to be increased by 40% instead of 25%. And then you're also not going to be able to exceed 40 times the attack of your main character instead of 25. So just more damage on it. And then after you use it, for each stack of burn, poison, or bleed, you're going to deal continuous damage equal to 0.5% of the target's max HP, not exceeding 60 times the protagonist's attack. So again, it's capped out there. But basically, this build revolves purely around getting poisons, bleeds, that type of stuff down on your opponents. And that's not something that happens a crazy amount unless you are picking up lucky skills and things like that. Skill damage is where most of your damage comes from, or the actual adventure damage is where your damage comes from, not the dots themselves. They're actually pretty weak. I don't know, maybe this is a hot take, and maybe I just don't know enough about Overlord Deer to rate this one in particular, because, well, most people haven't had a lot of experience with it. But that in conjunction with, and this one's the one exception, because the resources for Overlord Deer share with the global of your account rather than like the actual individual resources, like Capybara, that's meant for mounts and artifacts. The Dark Moon tickets, those are only meant for mounts. Overlord Deer requires gems, and that can be very expensive. So to me, this is a C tier. It's a C tier, guys. It is a C tier. But that's where I would put all of the mounts. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. I'm sure there are some things that people disagree with, but this is just kind of how I view a lot of the mounts. I think the one indisputable one for most people is Diego. Diego is just so powerful in ramping up your damage. And when you get to the late game like this and you start maxing out stats, it is just so important to have that extra combo count to really go off. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all for the next one.